Well, welcome everybody, and thanks for your persistence for trying to make sure you could get into this to this session. I did send a little reminder out. I should have put the link in. This sounds like now to put the reminder in, but I wanted to make sure you all had a copy of the slides, and I know that quite a number of the folks that had submitted responses to the survey were not able to join us this evening, as a couple of chapters have their regular meetings this evening. And a couple of other folks that had registered had told me they were not able to join us. But welcome to all of you. And hopefully as more folks come in, we'll hear a welcome and welcome them in. And with this being recorded, I'll be able to send out the recording of the presentation, and hopefully those of you that want to have or lend any discussion, we can do that. So now my next test is to share my screen, and I do have it here. Boy, I'm really impressed with myself. There we go. So this is the slideshow, and then I'm going to try to make sure. There we go. Here's a quick review of what I'm going to try to do this evening. I'm hoping I can keep this to now, to about 8:15. But this is the outline. I do a quick review of how we use the identification process for high priority issues, both retrospectively and here for this year, these next legislative session, or the current legislative session. A little bit about the education and outreach statements. We'll do a review of the survey results from each of the sections, and then we'll do a discussion of the results that related to how the chapters responded. The ones that would had 100% support, those that had between 80 and 100, and then the conservation issues that had less than 80, less than 70 in actuality, and then take a quick look at next steps. Just a quick review. So those of you that may have been with us 3 years ago, we adopted and adapted a model from the State Council of New York, or the Council of New York State, the chapters there that worked with the what was then the New York State Office, and they developed their priorities as a chapter network, worked with the state office, and then they also publish what they call their policy book, and it's for each. They used to do it annually, and they've gone to every session now, every 2-year session. We used this process to do 23 and 24. That was quite in depth because it was the first time we did it. We started in 2022. Phil Whitmer, who's on this call, facilitated some of the sessions that we had. We had multiple sessions in the fall of 2022 where we just began to identify what chapters were asking us to think about, that we could pull together as a state network to look at issues that were important across the chapters in the state. Jim Bonner took the results from that, and really I give him credit for creating what we now do by looking at our education and outreach statements. This year was a little bit easier because we had a series of issues that were already in place from 23, 20, and 24. And then in our survey, we were able to add some of the issues that had interest from 2 years ago, from 23, 24, and a couple of other suggestions to get reactions. The education and outreach statements I'll go to next. Basically, we do 2-page statements. One kind of does the coverage of the issue. This was one that we did for mitigation of bird collision. This was authored by Peter Sanger and describes what the issue is. And that's the first page, and it's the model for each of the issues with an overview. And then the second page, this is where Jim Bonner's matcher came in. We looked on the left-hand column at the chapter role, the council role, and Audubon partner role. We also then across looked at what individual or members might do based on what each of our roles could be. We looked at the community and municipal level, and then at the state and federal level. We're not going to do anything in depth here, but as we think about our issues, we continue to look at this. This list was not prescriptive. It was really meant to be suggestive and kind of give an idea of how we could act each at our own level and how we could interact across levels with different kinds of support. For this survey, these are the individuals who submitted by position. So this is the just indicating when somebody submitted it, who they were. And it ranged everywhere from the president to an advocacy chair to another officer or board member, just as a point of, of interest. And again, we had 19 of the 20 chapters respond. The procedures varied widely. We had some that had just the executive committee of their chapter, their full board. I know a few chapters asked for a PDF of the survey and did it as a full board and responded and pulled it together. Sometimes it was the Conservation or Advocacy Committee. I'm not going to read it all, but sometimes there were other ways where it was the president doing it on behalf or others that were involved that did this on behalf of their chapter and the procedure they used. In section 1, we looked at our issues from 23-24 that we called our conservation issues of highest priority, and then we asked the chapters to respond if they should remain. So here's the first one with bird collision. 100%, all 19 chapters wanted to have this retained as a high priority issue, for the council and among our chapters. Don't think there needs to be a whole lot of comment here, but this clearly was one of, I think, 4 or 5 that were 100% supported. We got comments, and these are comments that came through. I don't know if anybody that is on the call wants to expand on their comment, but they're pretty self-explanatory in terms of what some, not all 19 chapters put comments in. And I was really pleased that Jim and Tess put comments in. They put one in for both bird collision and lights out, and theirs will come up in the next section after lights out. But you can see that there's a lot of support across the network for this, and some variation based on the chapters. Anybody want to comment on this at all? All right, I'll go to the next slide. Lights out was another one that everyone wanted to retain, all 19 chapters, 100% support. We recognize that lights out and mitigation of bird collision kind of go in tandem. We know that light attracts birds to urban centers often, and then they collide with windows and glass. But a lot of municipalities or a lot of our chapters are finding success in getting lights out programs going first, and then moving to mitigation of bird collision as a after they have gotten lights out started. Here are the comments here that are listed. Couple here talked about resolutions by their bird towns that were based in a municipality with a lights out particular comment or issue. And I don't know if Tess or Jim, you want to comment on, I put your comment in there in each case with AMA. If you want to expand on what you had shared for both lights out and mitigation of bird collision.
Hey everybody, this is Jim. I don't have much more to add. I think everyone on the call knows that we're following the National Audubon Society flight plan, and so our guidance is to work on conservation, climate change, and environmental restoration, funding for environmental agencies at the state and federal level. So that's why we answered it the way we do, or the way we did. I think that everyone on the call knows that there are staff people at AMA and National who have a background in working on lights out and collisions. They're all still here, and I think they could be resources for the chapter network and for the council. So when we say that we're not prioritizing it, it doesn't mean that the resources that are available to us are going to go away. So I think that we'd look for ways that we can support the work the council does on this if the council decides to continue to prioritize it.
Yep. Yeah, thanks for that, Jim. And we do know we'll look at the Audubon, the federal office. I know that the Quigley and um, yeah, I forget the guy from Virginia. That's okay. But the bipartisan bird collision bill, the Bird Friendly Building Act, uh, has been introduced already in this Congress. But in all likelihood, it's been introduced, I think, in the last 5 Congresses and has not proceeded well as far as anything happening at the federal level with bird safe buildings. I did hear from, just as a matter of point, from Andy Loza from We Conserve PA, who gave me the heads up that 2 outdoor lighting bills have just come out, and I'll put out some information on this, but they're anticipating an April 7th vote on outdoor lighting practices to reduce light pollution from public entities. That's all the state can really control. And then there's another one looking at, you know, some communities put the burden to prepare a cumulative environmental impact report in a separate bill having to do with light. I'm not quite sure. I haven't read the bills yet, but it looks like they only have Democratic co-sponsors at this point. But I'll provide that information in case there's an opportunity for us to pursue it. Looks like the sponsor is from Westchester, and there's been a number of others that have co-sponsored it, but it looks to be all Democratic at this point. And it usually bodes well if you can get bipartisan support and co-sponsorship for things to move forward. Utility scale solar came out at 89.5%. We have done a lot of work with this in the last legislative session, mostly looking at the siting of solar, but also promoting things like solar for schools. We were ardent proponents of that bill, which did pass in the last legislative session, almost on the final day. And we're supporting solar for all and community solar coming forward as well. And hopefully both of those will succeed in allowing solar to be distributed with some financial support in areas that are especially brownfields and rooftops and other areas that don't have a direct conflict with siting and bird habitat. Here are the comments that have come in. And then again, I know Jim and Tess have a comment about solar projects and wind farms. The wind issue will come up next, but you can see what's here. I was curious about which chapter, and offhand, I don't know, that if we dropped utility scale solar, then the IBA restrictions should be dropped. I'm not quite sure what that meant, and I'll follow up unless somebody's online that can explain that comment. But there's that. Jim or Tess, do you want to comment on AMA?
Just that renewable energy is going to be a priority for us. Obviously, in Pennsylvania, there's more of a focus on solar than there is on wind at least at the moment. I know that could change. The community solar bill is something that we're going to be prioritizing as long as the new language doesn't pose any problems. But if it's similar to the last bill, then it's something we're going to be supporting. I do know that it'll it's going to include other forms of energy like geothermal. It's gonna be called community energy, I think, instead of just community solar. And the idea there is that it'll hopefully bring in a broader group of supporters because it might include agriculture digesters and and geothermal to give it more energy to get across the finish line this year. So we're excited about that. And then obviously we're also going to be paying attention to the proposals around the siting body called Reset. And that's also very early on. I think we'll see bill language for that in the next week or so, hopefully. But yeah, I just to reiterate, we're going to focus on appropriate siting and trying to find balance between meeting our energy needs and preventing habitat fragmentation.
That's good, and hopefully we can help coordinate with you on that as well. Here's the industrial wind farm again. Um, Pretty strong support for what we had before. Um, I know there's concerns, and Laura not able to make it tonight, but she is the president of SOAR, Save Our Allegheny Ridges, and it's a particular concern to many of our chapters that I think there's at least 7 that have hawk watches, many of which are on the ridges in Pennsylvania, and it's a concern. And then here are the comments. This is the same comment from AMA below. I just reduplicated here. But we talked about Anthracite Ridge and a couple of other things that had come up in the last 2 years, and looking at the siting of wind energy. But I think, as Jim noted, is that wind energy does not seem to be a particularly uh, pressing issue in Pennsylvania. Laura keeps us apprised. I think the one we need to keep an eye out on is Lake Erie, and I know Presque Isle has kind of just raised concerns that we should monitor what might be going on in terms of the siting of wind farms that might be in Lake Erie. Some of you may recall a few years back, uh, one called the Icebreaker Project in Western Lake Erie that raised some concerns for folks in Ohio. Had some, I think, National Audubon, great activity to try to get them to modify some things, which I think they were willing to do. Stopping the turbines from turning at certain points with migration and such, but to my knowledge, that project had not gone forward. Any other comments? Okay. Environmental education, again, very, very broad support. Um, Again, we were instrumental in being active. I don't think we were the sole the sole actor in this, but real concerns when the academic standards are being revised, and that they were looking at amalgamating what had been the ecology and environment standards in with a broader set of scientific standards. And we worked hard with several of our chapters in particular to ask that that be slowed up in terms of adoption, and the standards were revised to keep some of our concerns present. What we don't know now is what's going to be happening with the apparent dissolution of the Federal Department of Education. While it doesn't focus specifically on ecology and the environment, funding for schools and school districts is going to be impacted. I've already seen some school districts now in their budget process talking about raising local taxes out of the fear of losing federal funds, and don't know at the local level where our chapters are and our bird towns are, to keep an eye on how that may impact the curriculum in their local schools and school districts. This is the comments that are there. And Tess, I don't know, I know you have an educational background as a librarian. I don't know if you wanted to comment further on this.
Yeah, I just wanted to note that I'd be happy to either serve as a resource or help um spread any sort of advocacy that you all do in this area. I'm just really passionate about environmental education in Pennsylvania and beyond. So anything you do that is in that vein, I'd be happy to support.
Very good. Any other questions or comments? Okay. Single-use plastic, again, uh, pretty significant support, but the comments associated with this was kind of interesting. Some people wanted it higher on the list. Some weren't quite sure how we can work on this. I don't think we're going to see federal. I guess Penn Environment has been a leader in trying to get statewide bans, but the real action has been, and if you look at the fourth bullet, at the municipal level, there have been more and more plastic bag bans where people need to either bring in their own reusable bags when they go grocery shopping. And that's where the success has been. A lot of our bird towns have had that success. And I think that's some of the comments here. And again, AMA, I don't know if you wanted to, comment here, Jim or Tess.
Nothing to add other than if it's something that you all decide to do, it might be the kind of thing we could write a letter of support for or that sort of thing, but it's not something that we're gonna prioritize.
Yeah, and I know there's been efforts in legislative session after legislative session to try to get something statewide going, but I don't think there's been much success there at all. Any other comment?
Yeah, I'll just add, Lee, that even though the issue is getting a lot of visibility and certainly action at the community level, I'm hard pressed to see what we do as a group or even as individual chapters. So it's one of these situations where I think the priority for the issue may be high because it's certainly impacting all of us. What's unclear is how it's impacting all of us, because the science behind that is still unclear. But it's not clear what one would actually do as a Audubon chapter.
Yeah, I think basically, and I know some folks from Valley Forge are on board, but I think at this point, supporting municipalities that are in a chapter territory, and especially if you have a bird town, I know there have been some webinars on this with our bird town program on how to do this and how to get this rolling in your individual community. I was a couple of years back with a New York Council meeting. There was a chapter in the Delaware River watershed that used grant money to create cloth bags with their chapter logo on it, reusable bags to try to promote both their chapter and the issue of using reusable bags. But it's just a couple that come to mind. But again, I think the action here is at the chapter level. I don't know what all the microparticles of plastic are doing. I'm blaming some of my brain fog on that, but that's not scientific.
Lee,
Yes.
I would just add that the science is getting a lot better about the impact of microplastics on birds, particularly downstream, and we all live upstream from seabirds, and the percentage of the birds that have plastic in them, which they can't get rid of, continues to grow, and there's a pretty high mortality rate for birds that consume plastic.
Yeah, thanks for that, Phil. And then again, AMA not leading on this issue, but will support us as any ongoing action. I don't know if Tess or Jim, you want to expand on that.
I don't have anything to add.
Okey doke. This one is, habitat restoration, native plants. We've done a number of activities under this. And of course, our bird habitat recognition program that all of you have apparently registered for, and we'll get the link for it on April 9th in terms of the update on this. But there's a lot of interest around this area, not just with bird habitat recognition in yards, but also looking at noxious plants, getting other kinds of plants listed on the state list so they are not sold in nurseries. That type of thing. But a lot of interest here, and it's one of the other areas where we have 100% support. I'm see a number of the kinds of things here. You have the slides. I'm not going to read all of these to you, but I did find that I guess about the fifth bullet down that looking at pesticides and other things we might want to consider in the future, because people, look at nicotides and other kinds of things that are used in the plants that are in nurseries or in markets where you buy plants, that something we need to be aware of. And I think that may be something when we modify our education and outreach statement here to make sure those points are included. I know some of us had heard Jim and Tess talk about the forestry work that they're doing. You want to take a moment to talk about that priority for Audubon Mid-Atlantic, Jim or Tess?
Sure, thanks. When Tess and I were looking at the survey, and again, I want to remind people we didn't fill it out. We just offered these comments, which Lee is sharing with you all here. This one seemed to really, or come closest to lining up with our forestry work in the state. And I think in terms of Pennsylvania habitat restoration, our involvement in this type of work, and this has some overlay with native plants too, is really all about what our conservation team and our healthy forestry team is doing in the state of Pennsylvania. And it's with a primary focus on bringing more resources to DCNR, DEP, and the Department of Agriculture to more better actively manage those forests in Pennsylvania, promote healthy forest management, and make sure that habitats are not fragmented, that the state's forests stay as contiguous as possible, and for celebrating all the benefits that they bring to the state. And then in terms of native plants, this overlaps with our forestry work, because one of the biggest threats is invasive species to our healthy forests. And so we're interested in ways that we can encourage more native plants across the state, but also stop the spread of invasives. So that also involves some of our policy work, is working with a working group made up of state agencies that are tasked with managing invasive species across the state and preventing their spread. So that's what our short comment there tried to let the point be know, that if it relates to forestry or watershed, then it will likely overlap with our habitat restoration and plant policy goals in Pennsylvania.
Thanks, Jim. Any other questions? Oops, I don't know how I'm doing that. All right, any other questions or comments? Okey doke. Another one that was 100% full funding of our state and federal agencies and programs. And I think the corollary to this is also looking at the especially federal legislation, some of the bedrock environmental laws, Clean Water Act, Endangered Species Act, which mentioned in the last our last conservation alert, and some of the others, that we are going to be facing constant attacks on deregulation and efforts to either eliminate or seriously water down the legislation that we have supported, for many years. So that kind of goes with this as well. So full funding is something we have supported for both DEP, DCNR, Fish and Boat Commission, other environmental agencies, and of course at the federal level where, I don't know if you have anybody here can clearly tell me what's going on, you can take over, but it's unusual times for sure. And then here are some of the comments that came in. A mortal fight at the federal level. It's a must do at the state level. And it's gotten more and more difficulty. And of course, this is one of the continuing priorities for AMA. And it's hopefully we can collaborate and make sure we're pulling in the same direction for all of this efforts, especially in the state budget, as that's going to become more and more critical in the coming months before June. Any other comments or suggestions or? Okay. Now, section 2 was where we picked up some of the other issues that have come up in the last session. Bird Safe Pennsylvania. This seemed to be probably not well explained or understood, maybe a fault with a survey. But you can see there was just close to 80% on this. It was under 80. And then some folks were trying to figure out, well, aren't we doing this with lights out and bird collision and the other stuff? The real thought here is that we have multiple chapters that are beginning to take a look at lights out across the state. There is a national every other month group of Audubon entities that talk about what they're doing in their own communities or in their own states relative to bird collision and lights out. And it's an effort to kind of have a coalition. Question here is, does the council want to become an actor to try to help with, Appalachian Audubon, Valley Forge and Liberty Bird Alliance with Bird Safe Philly, Appalachian Audubon with Lights Out Harrisburg. Presque Isle has their first meeting next week to look at a Lights Out Erie effort. Presque Isle's involved with that. There's some efforts going on in Pittsburgh and then also at State College. So, do we want to work at least to support a coalition of these different entities across the state so we can share resources and practices? So that is that's at issue here. So with that, you'll see when we come back in, I'm going to suggest that we make this an issue for us, but I'm very open if people feel this is not really a conservation issue per se, but more of an administrative issue or a program issue that we may want to use some of our resources to work together on that. Any comment? Okay. Transmission and pipelines. See, less than half of the chapters supported this. I don't think it's because they thought it was unimportant. They just didn't think it was a critical issue for them or our chapters. This is some of the comments that came in. It's kind of all over the map, but again, not every chapter participated in terms of putting in comments, but it's clear they did not have support as a priority issue for us. So AMA does look at the transmission lines, and I don't think we're concerned about putting in more high volume cable, replacing the less efficient ones. But it's not a priority issue for us. Jim or Tess, do you want to talk about this?
I'll just mention that while we don't necessarily know what this will look like in Pennsylvania over the next year or two, that National Audubon is drawing attention to transmission lines. And I'll put a link in the chat about a report that's about a year old. Did that go in? That National Audubon put together. It's just sort of raising everyone's awareness that there's going to be a tremendous amount of new transmission planned throughout the country and in Pennsylvania, and there needs to be guidelines, both policy guidelines and physical design guidelines in place to make sure that it doesn't carve up habitat willy-nilly, and that it's done in a way that is does the least amount of harm to birds. Because whether we like it or not, it's coming. And so the conservation community needs to be prepared for it and to advocate for good transmission.
Yeah,
So that's going to be like, it's just going to be something we're paying attention to, even though I might not necessarily know how that'll play out in Pennsylvania in the next year.
yeah, man, thanks for that, Jim. And I think some of us were on a National Audubon webinar. It might be a year, could be longer, with Gary George talking. And I remember it's even replacing the existing cables on existing transmission lines would do a great deal to make for more efficient and carrying capacity of those lines for increased capacity for electrical transmission. Important bird areas again came up pretty high. This was a project that was started in Pennsylvania. National Audubon had was the United States licensee, if that's the correct term, from what is it? BirdLife International that started the IBA program globally, and Pennsylvania was the first state to really model and implement it. I think we're somewhere around 88 IBAs in the state, and we have identified it as important areas to pay attention to protect. Some of you may know Frank Gill. It was under his watch as Vice President of Science that the IBA program was started, and he recognized that chapters would be significant in protecting and keeping a watch on IBAs that were not already part of state parks or not already part of protected land, so that we could weigh in with some of the data that was coming. I am reminded by multiple people when I talk about IBAs that they are not scientific. There is good data and why they were created as IBAs. I know some of that background and data seems to have been lost, but going the wrong way. But important to take a look at this, and it was broadly supported by our chapters. Any comment on this? Good. PA Wilds. I know we have Lycoming on board. I don't think we have Ty Dotton on board. You may remember there was some attention paid through conservation alerts. I think Tess, you had it in some communications. The Maryland National Guard was going to do low flights over portions of Pennsylvania, and it was really the Pennsylvania Wilds Coalition. It's that north central part of the state where the Allegheny National Forest is located, where there's a great deal of concern about protecting those areas. And so that was one area in the last session where we sounded the alert to make sure there was some pressure made to make sure those low flyovers would not go over. The other threats that we heard is the state legislature passed direction, I guess it was legislation, that they wanted broader use of some of the state parks for recreational vehicles, snowmobiles, off-road dirt bikes, motorized bikes and that kind of thing, which are a great concern to where they're located and what the impact of their use is. And that's been a area of concern for DCNR, but they're under the direction of the state legislature. And this may be one area where I think most of us recognize that This is a very important part of the state for scarlet tanagers, wood thrush, other breeding birds that are in this contiguous forest. Again, looking at the federal level, don't know what the kind of thing is going to be happening with lumber tariffs and increased demand for lumber being and lumbering happening in the United States. So this is what came up. And, I know the question here with Pennsylvania Wilds for AMA, I think, Tess, you might recall the low flight issues that was sounded by DCNR to protect PA wilds. So that's the kind of thing we're looking at. White-tailed deer.
Lee,
This way. Oh.
I'll just say one thing about the since you mentioned it, really the challenge for us up here is their ATV trails. There's a very active ATV riding group, and their push for expanding the ATV trails through state forest, particularly in the Pine Creek Valley, is one of our big concerns. So that's why that PA Wilds right now, I mean, we're really thankful for that the low flights from the Maryland National Guard didn't happen, but that's the current challenge for us. Just wanted to throw that out there for you.
Yeah, thanks for that, Bruce. And I think this is where the other thing, here I am in Philadelphia or close to Philadelphia and think, well, what does that have to do with me? The thing is that we have a lot of legislators down here, and there's fewer legislators in these portions of the state, and working together to understand what this issue is and what the impact is on the forest and on these state lands, is that we can be help provide leverage to prevent the expansion of this kind of thing in other state parks up there. We recognize that there's people that have all kinds of recreational needs, not just birders and not just hunters, but folks that use these kinds of intrusive means of getting into and across these protected areas is a concern. So I'll leave it at that unless there's any other comment. Okey-doke. White-tailed deer. What's very interesting here, this was a high priority issue years ago for the Audubon, Pennsylvania, for the state office in Pennsylvania. And Tim, he's now with the Fish and Boat Commission. Tim followed Cindy Dunn as the executive director for Audubon, Pennsylvania. And this became a huge issue. Some of you may have the orange hat, Audubon, Pennsylvania hat. That was to show that our support for hunters. But the idea was to expand deer season, that deer were an important, because they've lost their natural predators who are pretty destructive to forests, but no support here in terms of overwhelming support from the chapters for this as a priority. Maybe a priority locally for suburban communities that want deer hunts, and some more increasingly doing that, including some of the communities in our area, to make sure we're controlling them in county parks and state parks and so on. And those are some of the comments here. Jim and Tess, I don't know, invite you to make a comment if you wish.
Nothing to add besides what's there.
Sounds good.
I would just echo what you said, Lee. I mean, for suburban areas, I know one of the things that bird towns are struggling with is we're trying to get people to plant native plants, and the deer will decimate those, and so it's a real a real problem in many suburban communities.
Thanks for that, Phil. Anybody else?
Yeah, can you hear? Yeah.
Yes.
I would add, it's not just suburban. I mean, the forests are really being threatened by deer too. I'm sure Jim can probably add more to that, but they're browsing. I mean, if you don't have what do they call it, the exclusive fences, you can clearly see the difference in our forests where browsing is just destroying the forests.
Yeah, Bruce, I mentioned, and some of the folks may remember, the Valley Forge National Historical Park was identified as a potential IBA way back when the IBA program was being formed, but there was no controlled deer hunt and if you looked at the woodlands in the park, there was absolutely no understory. You had the mature trees, and then you could see clear through. And in the wintertime in particular, you could just see that there was nothing growing. I think that has changed a bit because they're doing more controlled hunts, and that has been a factor in helping to restore some of the understory. But it's a long road, and there are some folks that folks that grew up on Bambi. Some of you may not even know what Bambi is. I guess you'd be my age with Disney, but you need to understand that deer have quite an impact on forests, but not a priority issue for us in terms of the council. And fracking also didn't get broad support from at least half of our chapters, and I think the comments are pretty telling here. It is a fragmenting technology. There's a lot of deer, a lot of issues with water quality. There are other organizations that are taking the lead on this. I think the only thing I would highlight is I think we need to watch those of us that are in the Coalition for the Delaware River Watershed. There is going to be pressure to open up the watershed to fracking up in the northeast part of the state. Fracking is still not allowed in New York State, but we may see some pressure that may relate to funding to the Delaware River watershed and our interests there to try to keep fracking out or to get fracking open to that. We lost our chapter in Northeast PA, so it's going to be a little bit harder for us to monitor. But those of us with the Coalition for the Delaware River Watershed in the council might be able to keep an ear to the ground for what's going on here. Mine cleanup again. Some approach for this in the capping area, but didn't seem to rise to a high priority issue. Did see it as important. You can see some of the different comments here. Some of the chapters didn't see it as totally relevant. There is some issues related to climate with the capping of gas wells, and that does seem to be being promoted pretty widely by the governor and others, that this is getting done to some degree. Again, I know I put down AMA, Tess, and Jim, your comments for all three of these, but I think it's pretty self-explanatory here. Cats was probably the most interesting one in the whole thing. A lot of different feeling on this. Didn't seem to rise to a high priority because it's so hard to figure out what can you do at the state level for the threat of outdoor and feral cats. So it's kind of a conundrum. I know some of the bird towns are working on this in municipalities, but I don't know how you support this at the state and clearly not at the federal level. I know this comes up in New York. There are some chapters that see this as a high priority, and I know it makes me smile, but some of the folks in New York indicate that coyotes have become a very important controlling factor for outdoor and feral cats in those portions of the state that have a significant coyote population. It always brings a smile to my face, but that's we talk about it here. And here are the comments that came with that. And finally, section 3, this was kind of the open-ended, you know, talking about native plants and pesticides again. Whether we can share materials, you know, I thought the second bullet is something we need to be doing. I've been seeing reinventing the wheel as a recurring issue. You know, we don't have to. There's so much out there that we can use and share, and things that we're finding success with chapters. The native plant corridors, I think Jim and Tess, you've talked about some recent legislation to look at safe underpasses or overpasses for wildlife being introduced in the state legislature. You know, and another range of things here. Any comments on this? Okay, here are some other additional issues. More about collaboration. DC, a lot of people, climate change being mentioned. I think, you know, what we are doing with, you know, community solar and that type of thing is our way to help address it, and protecting the forests and native plants and doing more tree planting and that kind of thing is a help. But, you know, we can also continue to track any kind of legislation that I'm not sure is going to get much support in the next 4 years at the federal level. Any other comment? Okay, so here's the scorecard. We have these issues that got 100% support. These are ones that would continue from the last 2 years into the current 2 years coming forward, the current legislative sessions. These are ones that have 80% or above. Some of them with the asterisk are ones that are existing high priority conservation issues. So they would continue. The question is then in adding important bird areas, PA wilds, and Bird Safe Pennsylvania, I have there was 78.9%. And, you know, I'm looking at things that were 80% or above, not trying to mess up things with a percentage, but in some ways, Bird Safe Pennsylvania is more of a program or administrative approach. And I would suggest we don't add that as a high priority issue, but add it as a way that we can work with our chapters and bird towns that are part of activities with, you know, lights out, monitoring, that type of thing. And that, again, a couple of us are working with nationally every other month with a coalition of Audubon entities that meet and discuss what they're doing or share ideas in terms of their bird safe and lights out programs. So is that fair? Is everybody okay with that?
Yeah, I agree with you, Lee. That sounds like an approach. It's nothing new. It's already two of our highest priority programs and conservation issues. It's just how we go about working together, right?
Yep, that's really what it's about, I think. That's why it was a kind of a poor question on the survey. I think it wasn't clear, but I think the reason it's not clear is because it's not an issue per se. It's really more of a program.
Mhm.
I agree with you as well, Lee.
Thank you, Neelish. And then these are the ones that just did not get support, 70% or less. So these would not, you know, rise to ones that need that. And then here's our next steps. We need to revise education and outreach statements for both the existing and for the new. And Karen, who just spoke about Bird Safe Pennsylvania, was so excited about IBAs. Can I share this, Karen?
Sure.
She actually already drafted the second page of what, you know, the chapters do, what the council does, what our Audubon partners do, and what the individual and, you know, municipal and state and federal level can do. So she's already done a part of that, hoping that IBAs would be identified. She had no guarantee of that, but I guess that's how committed you are, Karen.
Lee, can we go
Yes.
back to the PA wilds for a minute?
Yes.
I'm just curious what others think about that, and I'll just throw out, it is an important issue for our chapter, obviously, because that's part of our region. On the issues, on the two issues that well, there are multiple issues, but the Maryland National Guard overflights and even the ATV trails, really that was a coalition of conservation groups. Trout Unlimited, especially with the ATV trails, played a lead role. And I wonder, I mean, certainly the PA Wilds is important to bird population, but I wonder if that should be a conservation issue for our council as a whole.
It is. Are you saying it shouldn't be, Jim? Bruce?
No, I'm looking for some other comment from that, whether, you know, what's the focus there? I mean, really, the PA Wilds makes up a huge area of forest.
I wonder
so
what happened to
forest-
my, I'm looking for that,
You ended the slideshow, I think.
well, I'll just try to share it again.
Yeah. But what I'm saying is, I mean, so forest habitat, for example, in the PA Wilds is really a critical issue. Protecting that region from threats like the expansion of ATV trails into state, particularly onto state land, state DCNR land. That's been a priority for us. Stopping the Maryland National Guard. But I guess what I'm saying is they tend to be, other than the habitat element, which is largely forest, they tend to be single issue type issues that affect the PA Wilds that a lot of groups are involved in addressing, is what I'm saying. So
Yeah.
what I'm asking is do people from other parts of the state see the PA Wilds as such a special part of Pennsylvania that it should be elevated to a conservation of highest priority for us? I'm just asking for some feedback there.
Yeah, I'm trying to find, I don't know what I did. Neelish, I wish you were here at my shoulder.
Lee, go to share. Go to share.
No,
your
you are
screen.
sharing. You're sharing
I am.
already. Just click back. So you see, this is the end of the slideshow. There you go.
Yeah,
Ah.
there you go.
All right.
Bruce, I would say that if nobody's gone through the PA Wilds, they can't appreciate it and they should. And I think it should be raised to a very high priority on our list.
Well, it is. So, you know, it's being added as a new one. And I think what Bruce wanted to see were the comments.
Yeah, I
Now,
just was just curious how others felt. I just didn't want to, I'm certainly on board with it, but I want to make sure that others understand, why that area is special and
Well, I think, to answer your question directly, I think it is largely about habitat. And it's some of the most contiguous habitat. So yes, where there's kind of individual issues that happen specifically at each, maybe that part of it is less of what our priority is. And ours is, more towards the habitat end of it.
Yeah. Well, and I just to make sure people are aware, I mean, the fracking issue and fragmentation of the forest is certainly, while it's not all the PA Wilds, it's certainly affecting the parts in Lycoming and Clinton counties.
Yes,
Right.
I think, Bruce, I'll probably circle back to you because we need to create a education and outreach statement, and we'll need a broad statement about the issue, why it's important
Right.
broadly. But in terms of the chart that comes about, here's where the other chapters that are sister chapters help. And again, I'm going back to the fact that DCNR had their hand forced by the state legislature to
Right.
open up some of those trails, and that's where we need to try to help here, even if we're here in Philadelphia or in Pittsburgh or what have you, that we can weigh in with our state legislators to help them understand why it's a bad idea to open these areas up to pressure groups that are, have other ways to get in and access and, use the forest or use these areas and not have to use, the kind of vehicles and other types of destructive, I call it destructive, but I know it's recreational, but
I will add that there is a local effort to designate a part of the Tiadaghton State Forest as a natural area, which would preclude that kind of expansion of ATV trails into at least the Pine Creek Valley.
yeah.
Which is so. All right, I just wanted to throw that out and make just curious what others thought on that. So
Yeah, and again, Bruce, I'm going to circle back to you to write the first part of the education outreach.
yeah, okay.
I can just throw something in. I agree with Peter that I'm totally behind having it be a priority area, but as far as ATVs go, I know you all know that one of the key issues is not just how the trails are designated and, designated conservation areas or whatever, but also its enforcement.
Right.
Because I know of places nearby that are supposed to be no ATVs and.
Yeah, that's a huge problem.
Yeah. Hey, just go around the city of Philadelphia at night and see these, 30 to 80 vehicles going up and down some of the major streets that are unlicensed vehicles that are just terrorize the communities. That's a whole different issue. That's a different kind of PA wilds.
Mhm.
It's right on my rural street as well,
There you go.
all over the state.
Well, sorry to
Well,
extend that conversation, but I just
No, it's okay.
wanted to hear a little verbal feedback from everybody.
That's
Well,
it.
I would say I think it's important to protect the PA wilds as well. I mean, selfishly, a lot of the birds that fly through my backyard are probably winding up in PA wilds to nest. And if we don't have that kind of nesting a habitat, nobody will have the birds.
Real good. I hope you're feeling that kind of support, Bruce. That's good. So educational outreach statements I had gone to new and revised. We have some committees around these issues, like the Renewable Energy Working Group. We may, as these areas we may want to expand our chapter involvement around these committees. Something to think about. Our website could probably, use some strengthening of our online resources. And again, this is working smart. Reference things that already exist. We don't need to invent new things, but for like monitoring bird collision and lights out, ABC is, staff and resources that are there. Cornell, Audubon have a lot of online resources, and we might want to make those a little bit more accessible with links on our website. There's other resources as well. And the chapter to chapter stuff that we can do, especially if with those particular issues, that's the Bird Safe Pennsylvania thing where we can share resources we may be using locally. Monitor opportunities to act on issues. This is where I think there's rich opportunities for Tess and Jim and for the council to work together and coordinate our efforts on mutual issues, keep each other informed, and perhaps even discuss what's the best way that we can mobilize to go forward with this. We continue to work with We Conserve PA. Andy's note to me about the lights out legislation just came by happenstance today, but we work with them to try to be aware of any action on the issues that we have concern. We don't have anybody in Harrisburg per se, and We Conserve PA is located there, and they can help us monitor. And I know Jim works with Penn Environment and some of the other groups there to stay informed of what's moving and what's not, and we can go from there. And then we'll continue our educational webinars. with bird towns and with the issues, try to expand some of those so we can get our conservation committees and advocacy committees up to speed on some of these issues. And use PA Wilds as just an example here. We could probably do some work where there's a better understanding of why that is important to chapters that are not in the north central part of the state. And then just a reminder that we are working, we are supporting the grant for the Susquehanna Riverlands Bird Summit. I know I got a message from York Audubon, very interested in grasslands, and that's going to be one of the topics with the Riverlands Bird Summit. That's going to be on September 26th. And then that's just in advance of the PSO weekend that starts that same evening in the Allentown area. So not hard to get from Lancaster to Allentown if you're interested in both, but it really will be, I think, a little bit of a different audience for each. And then we'll look at other steps too that just don't come to mind for the slide. But that's the conclusion of the program this evening. This is recorded so I can share it with our next drummer, or so that everybody can access it, or I might just send it out to everybody who responded that was not able to join us tonight or is waiting for April 9th for the bird habitat recognition program. That's the Zoom that they got by mistake. Any closing comments? Going once? Going twice? We are adjourned. Thank you.
Thanks, Lee.
Thank you, Lee.
Thank
Bye,
you.
guys.
Thank you, Lee.
Thank you.